Check the 40 show. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty. Why you acting all gaudy? This ain't a pod, this a party. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty. Why you acting all gaudy? This ain't a pod, this a party.
Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy 40 podcast. I am John DeBar with my co-host Matt Walker, missing in action. As always, Andrew Burke, unavailable today. Today we're going to be breaking down the NFC South, doing our divisional breakdowns for the NFL for fantasy purposes, and it's not that exciting. Walk, how you doing?
I'm doing, and that's sad that you feel that way, because this is perennially one of the most exciting divisions in the entire NFL. I mean, there's and a lot's happened in said division.
Slight disclaimer, I was particularly referring to the NFL draft part of it.
Fair enough, and a quality disclaimer, because to that point, you are correct. This is an absolute waste from an NFL draft fantasy football player influx position. But yeah, outside of that, excited to talk to the NFC South. But yes, they sucked as far as the draft was concerned, except for maybe one guy that I think you and I share a particular interest in this division.
Yeah. No, there's plenty. This is usually a pretty good division for fantasy purposes across the board. They're in a lot of shootouts, but two of them are indoors. They all have decent weather most of the time, so it's a productive division for fantasy. But yeah, I meant looking at it from the rookies coming in, and it's lackluster on that front.
Very true. Lack of sizzle.
Yeah, from
the NFL draft, and I blame Thomas Dimitroff personally for that, because they should have drafted CeeDee Lamb to go to those Falcons. It was an absolute no-brainer, but they thought A.J. Terrell was going to save their scorched earth secondary. So going to be interesting to see the return on that investment in the coming year. So good luck, Thomas. I think you're going to be out of a job in a year or so.
That's the thing. I mean, yeah, going not to get into Atlanta too much early here, but yeah, he's probably fired. It's hard to imagine. Short of them winning their division and making a decent run in the playoffs, it's hard to imagine the coach keeping his job. So seems like a wasted pick. You're right.
Yeah, but the Falcons aren't first.
No,
in the alphabetical order divisional breakdown. So why don't we dive headfirst into those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, John?
So in the draft, we try to focus on the offensive skill position players, but in the first, they did take Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle, who was my favorite of the big tackle group this year. Helped Brady behind the line there. They also went round 3, Keyshawn Vaughn, running back, round 5, Tyler Johnson, wide receiver, and one of my favorite sleepers, Raymond Calais, in the 7th of running back. Then I think they may have done a few things in free agency. Nothing really caught my eye. Nothing was big on the media radar. Just a guy named Tom Brady landing there and his best pal, Rob Gronkowski. What did you think of their offseason?
Patriots South. It's interesting what the Buccaneers were able to accomplish. I was all but convinced that Tom Brady was going to end up being a Charger at the end of the day. I don't know. It's because I wanted to believe it, that I thought it made sense, and it didn't. Clearly, the Buccaneers made a case to secure the services of Tom Brady and rocket up the Super Bowl odds rankings. So it's going to be an interesting season down in Tampa Bay. But we both like Keyshawn Vaughn. I like Tyler, and you like Tyler Johnson as well. So there's some names that landed there. I like Tyler Johnson. You know
I liked him until he landed here.
Gonna hem and haw. Unfortunately, he's probably going to make Justin Watson not a thing, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be difficult for Tyler Johnson to assume the wide receiver 3 very quickly in this offense. And while I do believe they're going to go 12 personnel heavy, so it might not be a big rookie year contribution, I don't think it's the worst spot in the world. Clearly, there could have been better. He could have landed on shallower depth charts. Like he could have went to the Jets and quickly ascended to their wide receiver 2 in no time. But I don't think it's a death sentence for Tyler Johnson. I just won't expect anything from him this year. So hearing a lot of Bruce Arians too, going from no risk it, no biscuit to you can't go broke making a profit. So his mentality has changed tremendously from the days of Carson Palmer and Jameis Winston leading the league in turnovers to Tom Brady, who we all know is not going to force passes regardless of who the head coach is or the receiver out there. So this offense, I think, is going to look drastically different than Bruce Arians' offenses of old.
I'm no Arians fan. That's not a secret. Shameless self-plug. I wrote a pretty damning piece on him for DLF a few months ago. So
let's throw that back out there. Yeah, let's get it back into public consciousness. We'll retweet it under the 40 handle. So, and I'll have to read it because I know you don't like him. I do. It's part of the reason why I was so unreasonably, but in hindsight, completely reasonably high on Chris Godwin going into last year, when everyone on Twitter that knows even I exist told me that I was a little nuts and that Chris Godwin wasn't going to be exactly what I said Chris Godwin was going to be. I almost nailed his stats for the season, and he missed 2 games. So hopefully he doesn't change too much, but I obviously still like Godwin a lot, especially if he's going to be running out of that slot for Tom Brady. So, but that's a total tangent.
Yes. So jumping into the Buccaneers here, who is your breakout for 2020 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I've started to struggle with breakouts because there's just a lot already have, so they can't break out anymore.
Sure.
There's others that could, but it's not a sure thing. So I don't want to mislead, and I'm certainly not here to make stuff up. Like this guy is definitely going to break out. So I have 2 guys written down. So I'm going to say their names, and if one of those 2 is your breakout, then I will talk about the other one. And then that's where we're going to go from here. Okay, because I'm pretty sure once I say the first name, I'm going to talk about the second name. So Keyshawn Vaughn or O.J. Howard?
I've got Howard, so.
Wow. I thought for sure you were going to have Keyshawn Vaughn, so easy enough. And I already know your entire O.J. Howard rationale. So it's probably going to sound similar to what I would have went with. Keyshawn motherfucking Vaughn was a favorite of the Fantasy 40 before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected him. He only became even more so due to the fact that we also collectively hate Ronald Jones. So this was a confluence of events unlike any other, probably in the history of the Fantasy 40. Player we really like, player we absolutely hate. It's probably akin to the Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler dynamic of a few years ago.
That is a good comparison for us.
We were way on one side and hated the other. I mean, we were keeping that seesaw firmly on the ground. We were so heavy on one side. But Keyshawn Vaughn, I don't like Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones cannot pass block, worth a shit. And while that isn't important in a lot of places, and while I've stated its lack of importance countless times, it is most certainly important when a statue like Tom Brady is sitting back there for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. So he is exclusively a running downs back that will carry very little passing game upside, in my opinion, because they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn at minimum for the passing game's work. And if it's not Keyshawn Vaughn, it's going to be Dario Gumbawale. It's just not going to be Ronald Jones. That is what I'm all but certain of in this offense. And if Vaughn even siphons off 30% of the rushing down work from Ronald Jones with all the passing game work and what Tom Brady has done with pass catching running backs in his career, I can't see any reason why Keyshawn Vaughn can't break out in his rookie season. To me, an unsettled depth chart that is not insurmountable by any means. The unfortunate off seasons, he's not going to really get the mini camps and all that type of stuff. And although Tom Brady is just a professional rule breaker out there doing whatever he wants in Tampa, walking in other people's houses, holding impromptu passing sessions, playing golf with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson. I hope he spent some time with Keyshawn Vaughn as well, because I just really want to see it from Keyshawn Vaughn, because if he gets the starter's gig, he could be an RB1 this year.
Got nothing to add. I love him. My breakout, I went with Mr. O.J. Howard, who is currently being drafted as tight end 19. He had 39 targets as a rookie, 48 his second year, 53 last year. His targets have gone up every year. I know they brought Gronkowski in, so he's going to have competition at the tight end spot. Cameron Brate is there, who is, for whatever reason, going nowhere. I don't hate him, but, I mean, he's obviously locked in. He's got a role there. He's seen his touchdowns decrease, though. He went from 6 to 5 to only 1 last year. To me, Gronk is just – I don't see how a guy gets a year older, takes a year off, and comes out there better. I'm a total fade on Gronkowski this year. I could see Brate outperforming both of them, and, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. But similarly, like you said when we started this, breakouts are kind of hard to find. It's got to be someone who's got the skill to be good and just hasn't put it together yet. There weren't many guys on this roster that fit that bill except for O.J. Howard, so that is my breakout predictor. I wouldn't be surprised to see him. My comp for him when he came into the league was Gronk. So I could see him kind of, as the year progresses, maybe start a little slow, and as maybe Gronk slows down, Howard takes over a little more of the work, and I could see Brady leaning on him like he did a young Gronk in New England. So for me, it's O.J. Howard.
Yeah, I assumed you were going to lean on the Gronk injury, especially after what you did to Travis Kelce on the Kansas City Chiefs episode during the AFC West. So I saw that trade come down the tracks. I just can't imagine a world where you didn't want to speak about Keyshawn Vaughn right out the gate. And for those who don't know about Keyshawn Vaughn, he played on a shitty Vanderbilt team that went 9-16 in his 2 years there. Yep. And he still was able just to turn out yards and touchdowns, 21 rushing touchdowns, another 3 receiving, had 41 receptions in his 2 seasons there, including a 28 reception senior season. Checks a lot of boxes, 5'10", 214, has the body type necessary to be a bell cow back. He's a grown fucking man, and just those of you who don't like him, I don't like you.
And a guy, I mean, he's a little older, but this whole draft as a whole, most of these guys were a little older than usual. But he also, a lot of people don't put a ton of stock into this, but playing in the SEC, he's facing NFL, almost full defenses full of NFL players. So he was able to, like you said, on a dog shit team, succeed against NFL quality defenders. I think he's got a super safe floor at minimum.
Listen, he just turned 23 back in May. Happy belated birthday, Keyshawn. What do you want from the guy? You're getting, one, we're talking about this year for him, and 2, any running back, anything you get beyond 4 years is just gravy. And he'll only be at the age apex of 27 in 4 years. So that does not bother me the slightest bit. I know that that's some people's kind of knock against him, but not mine. I'm not expecting a 10-year career from Keyshawn Vaughn. Yeah, if he's a starting running back during Tom Brady's tenure for the Buccaneers, and he's already cashed that ticket for me.
That's fine. 2 years. You're right. So let's move on to your sleeper.
My sleeper. Don't we usually go bust, breakout bust? That's how
we can go bust. Yeah. I wrote it down in the wrong order. You're right.
All right. Well, I'm again giving you dealer's choice being out there in Vegas because I wrote down 2 names, and now I absolutely know which one you're going to go with this time. And it's either Mike Evans or Ronald Jones.
Oh, it's Mike Evans for me.
You went with Mike Evans. Fuck.
I did.
You're throwing me off both times. I would have pushed the chips in on the other name. Both times you're not trying to speak great about you're going to have Keyshawn Vaughn as your sleeper.
No.
What the fuck, John? You're not going to talk about either of these guys? Well, I'm glad I'm here then because I already said everything I need to say about Ronald Jones during the Keyshawn Vaughn segment of the breakout. And I don't care that he is out there toe tapping fades on Twitter right now. That pass will never get thrown to him in the NFL, so I'm not really sure as to why he is wasting his time perfecting a skill that is not relevant to him in the NFL. But I'm just not there on Ronald Jones. I mean, he is straight line fast. He can be explosive. He has ability and athletic ability. But I wasn't high on this dude coming out of college from USC. I just not impressed with him whatsoever. And that has persisted through 2 NFL seasons. And I also got that he kind of was a knucklehead at first and had to mature, and now he's taking all this seriously. And I'm like, of course he is, because he's staring down a new contract in a year or 2. So he better get his shit straight, or he's going to be out of the NFL in 3 years. But I just believe in Keyshawn Vaughn, and I don't believe in Ronald Jones. So, and they put 3rd-round capital on Keyshawn Vaughn as a win-now team. What is that telling you? It's telling you that they don't feel comfortable with Ronald Jones being their primary ball carrier. They wouldn't even – Peyton Barber. Ronald Jones could not keep Peyton Barber on the sideline in 2019. It was incapable of grabbing hold of that lead back role from Peyton Barber last year. And Keyshawn Vaughn is a world better than Peyton Barber. So that is all that I need to know to show me that Keyshawn Vaughn, unless he falls flat on his face, which anything is humanly possible, Keyshawn Vaughn will have more touches and be more productive from a fantasy perspective this year than Ronald Jones is. So Keyshawn Vaughn breakout, that makes Ronald Jones a bust.
I love it. I went, as no spoiler alert just a moment ago, Mike Evans. Look, do you know what he's averaged targets over his career?
A lot.
139.
Yeah.
139. I don't hate Mike Evans like a lot of people. He's just a product of volume. He offers nothing in yak. You mentioned earlier the old Arians, no risk it, no biscuit operation. He's accustomed to Winston squinting and just chucking a ball in his direction. And he's big enough and skilled enough to just go up and get it. And then he just falls down wherever he catches the ball. Brady's not going to do that. You already mentioned it. He's not going to get that massive workload, and the production isn't going to come with it. Brady is a dinker and dunker and throws safe passes. We mentioned, Dare being there in the passing game. If Vaughn can pick up what he can in the passing game, they've got 3 great tight ends. Godwin is going to be coming out of the slot like Edelman and Welker and other Brady favorite receivers of the past, who's going to get a ton of underneath bullshit. They also have Scotty Miller, and you mentioned Watson earlier. These are all guys that fit what Brady does way more than Mike Evans. So unless Evans changes his game dramatically, I don't see how he becomes one of Brady's favorites or puts up the numbers that we've seen in the past. He could become a big red zone threat and get the touchdowns to make up for the lack in volume. But there's no way I'm taking Mike Evans as a wide receiver 1 with Brady at the helm. So he is a bust to me this year.
Yeah, listen, wait till everyone, comes caping up for what Tom Brady did with Randy Moss some 10 plus years ago, and how he was able to utilize the deep ball, in his heyday. But I'm right there with you. I don't even think Mike Evans is being drafted as a wide receiver 1.
I think it's number 7.
Is he? Oh.
Well, for Dynasty, I don't know.
Dynasty, yeah. The people are still all over him. And whatever number you said, I looked at Mike Evans' stats, and he's averaging 9.3 targets per game for his career. So you were probably just looking at, just the raw stats per season. Yeah. But that 9.3 ends up translating to even higher than you said. It's on a 16-game pace. That's just under 150 targets a season for Mike Evans. Okay. And you're right. Mike OPI Evans, as I so dearingly reference to him, can't separate from anyone. He needs contested catches. Jameis Winston was the absolute perfect dance partner for Mike Evans during his early career, and why he was so successful, because Jameis Winston throws YOLO balls like no one else, and Tom Brady is not doing that. So unless Mike Evans can find a way into being a slant master and using some of that long speed, I'm with you. I wanted to talk about Mike Evans, as you see, while you summed it up quite perfectly. I still had to get on there, because he's not even a wide receiver 1 in Tampa anymore. That torch was passed last year, whether people want to believe it or not. Chris Godwin is much more of a complete and better wide receiver than Mike Evans is. So kudos to Mike Evans for stringing together whatever it was, that 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. I think it's only him and Randy Moss that have ever done it, or some sort of stat that kudos to him. But times, they are changing.
Do you think, I'm just running this number in my head as we're talking about it, Tampa probably throws the ball, 500 and change this year. Does he get 100 targets?
He will at the end of the day. And my apologies, Mike Evans, 6 straight 1,000-yard season starts career. He somehow scrubbed that 1,001-yard season in 2017. You threw one by us, Mike, but kudos to him. 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Nothing I can do to change that. And he does have a couple big TD seasons to his resume, but he hasn't had a double-digit TD season since 2016. 5, 8, and 8, and I know he missed some games last year, but he hasn't even been that epic TD producer that he was early on when he had 2 12-touchdown seasons in his first 3 years in the NFL. So I'm with you. Fade Mike Evans.
Moving on to sleepers. Who is your Tampa Bay Buccaneers sleeper?
All right. So, keeping with the theme, I have 2 guys.
Uh-oh.
And I don't know if we can get any closer here. So mine are either Dare Ogunbowale or Justin Watson.
I've got Dare, so
I wanted to talk. I thought I was going full running back in this segment. I love Dare. I brought him. I even learned how to say his name appropriately. I spoke so much about him last year while he didn't return investment, and he's being shit on Twitter from most of what I see about how he averaged like 1.5 yards per carry and, this and that. He wasn't even better on a per catch basis than Ronald Jones and yada, 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 but all irrelevant. Totally different offense. So I want to hear more about your Dari. Mine is who can be a sleeper. And I like Tyler Johnson, but this offseason is going to ruin a lot of rookies, in my opinion. Running backs should be okay because it's pretty much plug and play, but wide receiver is nuance and trust. So if you don't get reps with your quarterback and you're not in there, it's just not reading a playbook. So I think that's going to limit Tyler Johnson in his rookie year. We already know how I feel about Scotty Miller, who I do believe has changed his name officially to Scott Miller because I was on the Scott Fishbowl, and at least on my fantasy league, he was listed as Scott Miller. So kudos to you, Scott, for growing up in the offseason. But I like Justin Watson. The dude was uber productive at Penn, had a slight breakout at the end of the year when they lost Godwin and Mike Evans to injury, even though it was the Brashad Perriman show. But it was the Brashad Perriman show because that's what Jameis Winston does. He chucks it deep, and that's what Brashad Perriman does very well at the end of the day is his deep speed. It's not what Justin Watson does. Now, I think, to your point earlier, that Justin Watson is the kind of wide receiver that Tom Brady's going to like, and he's going to want him on the field at the end of the day. So while I don't think they're going to go heavy 3-wide sets, which limits his upside, I do believe Justin Watson will be the wide receiver 3 in Tampa this year. And if there is an injury again to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, Justin Watson could explode as he moves up that pecking order. So I think he is just deep sleeping in the weeds.
For my sleeper, I went with Mr. Dare Ogunbowale, who is currently running back 66 overall, which is pretty insane. In New England, James White averaged 80 receptions the last 2 years. If Dare keeps that third down change of pace role, and you mentioned earlier he's a decent pass blocker, they'll throw him out there a little bit earlier, even though he's not much in the rushing game. I could see him getting to 50 receptions this year, 400 yards, and even with only 2 touchdowns, that puts him at running back 46. So you're for me, when we do the sleeper, I do tend to look at ADP and sleeper as in who's going to grossly outperform that. And I think Dare putting up a floor of 20 spots higher than his ADP is fantastic. They did draft Raymond Calais, who I'm a big fan of in this system with Brady. I think he could cut into it, but like you had mentioned, especially for a 7th-round pick at running back, he might be looking at a year on the practice squad just to get up to NFL speed, leaving Dare there to get all that work himself. So for me, Dare at that ADP is just stealing. I snatched him at the end of Scott Fishbowl myself.
I saw that you did that. He did not get drafted in my league, and I looked at him a few times, but I got to the point where I had to hit wide receiver. So Dare could be a early waiver ad for me, but I'm right there with you. It's looking at what James White was, and unfortunately, I think Keyshawn Vaughn can eat into what Dario Ogunbowale's upside could be. I don't know that Ronald Jones could eat into that, so I think it's ultimately going to come down to who is the guy there. Sure. But we've seen what Brady does with pass-catching backs. It's not just James White. He's done it with Kevin Falk. He's done it with Danny Woodhead. He loves checking down to athletic guys that can create yards after they catch. So it's going to be someone. So why can't it be Dario Ogunbowale at running back 66?
No reason. And we will move on to the Atlanta Falcons.
No. You got to do the predictions, John.
Oh, shit. I thought they were going to do that at the very end. You're right. Sorry. I got all excited.
All right. So while you get unexcited, I'll dive in because I did not speak enough about Chris the Godwin during this Tampa Bay Buccaneers segment of the NFC South. So I am going to predict that Chris Godwin catches 100 balls in 2020. And you might say, wow, that's bold. And I'll tell you that he had just over 6 catches per game in his 14 games. He lost 2 games to injury. That's a pace of 98 receptions in 2019. So he was pretty much a 100-catch guy last year. He will be. He's playing all 16. He's pulling in 100-plus balls this year. He's going to be a magnet for Tom Brady, and he will again be a wide receiver 1.
My prediction, all I wrote was boo with an exclamation point. I'm not buying it. I think this team is the most overhyped team in the NFL right now. I think Arians sucks. I think Gronk is washed up. Brady's on his way out. I think everybody underperforms. That's my prediction. This is a dynasty ADP. Brady, quarterback 11, going to finish below that. Mike Evans, wide receiver 7, going to finish below that. Gronk is somehow tight end 8, going to finish below that. Ronald Jones, running back 36, gonna finish below that. I do like Keyshawn Vaughn at running back 33 and Godwin at wide receiver 6. So aside from those two guys, and I mentioned Dare as the sleeper outperforming that, but running back 66, there's plenty of room for him to beat that by even one spot. I think this whole team disappoints for fantasy. I'm not a big fan of anybody here except Keyshawn Vaughn and Chris Godwin. So boo, that's my prediction for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I am far more optimistic. Their defense got better as the year went on, and I think not having to absorb 30 turnovers from Jameis Winston in 2020 could be interesting for these Buccaneers. But we've done this in the past. So before we get off of the Buccaneers, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Pro Football Reference. And do you know what Chris Godwin's first name really is?
Oh, no.
We have talked about this before, and I had totally forgot about it until I just looked him up again because I wanted to confirm my 14-game starter, which I knew it happened because he broke my heart in the fantasy playoffs just about everywhere that I had him. But his name is actually Rod.
We have talked about it.
Rod Godwin.
Yeah, I remember.
Rod God. He is the Rod God from now on. And all I think of is Ramrod, Team Ramrod from Super Troopers. But no, Rod Godwin. Can totally understand why he went with Christopher, his God-given middle name. So.
All right. All this Rod talk's got me worked up, but let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons, who in the NFL draft took no one on the offensive skill position side of things. Luckily in free agency, they did add Todd Gurley and Hayden Hurst. That was it. That was all they brought in from a fantasy standpoint. Not much to discuss there, so we'll jump right into it. Who is your Atlanta Falcons breakout player?
My breakout player, I think he's everyone's anointed king of 2020, and I don't feel as strongly as others do about him, but I am going with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley was PPR wide receiver 27 in 2019. I thought he was higher, but he missed a few games himself. I believe that he's going to be a top 15 wide receiver in 2020. They let Austin Hooper go out the door, and while I do like Hayden Hurst, I don't love Hayden Hurst. I just think he falls into a tremendous opportunity. And while I do like Russell Gage, I do not love Russell Gage. So it's pretty much Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, which we all know Julio's going to get his 150 targets. But who else is Matt Ryan going to throw to in a healthy season with Calvin Ridley? They're going to find their way into both being top 15 wide receivers at the end of the day. Multiple times a quarterback has sustained 2 wide receiver ones. And I do believe that can happen with the Atlanta Falcons in 2020, where Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley could both be wide receiver ones, because I think they're going to stink again, and they're going to have to throw the ball a whole lot. And Matt Ryan is a viable quarterback to sustain 2 wide receivers. He's had the Julio Jones-Roddy White duo in the past, and why not Julio and Calvin Ridley in 2020?
I, too, went with Calvin Ridley, and I hate him. So let's leave that there. I had no choice. Looking at breakouts, so Atlanta is going to average. They've been averaging. They're going to go over 600 passing attempts again this year. They throw the ball a ton. Hooper's gone. Devonta Freeman's gone. Mohamed Sanu was moved halfway through the year. Just those 3 being gone, there's 209 vacated targets from last year. That's a third of their passing game. I don't see, they've got a very narrow distribution tree. Ridley should see a significant chunk of those 109 targets. I don't see how he doesn't, just based on the personnel they have there. So it's they're going to be throwing to Julio a ton, then it's Ridley, and then Hayden Hurst. And Gurley isn't necessarily a massive pass catcher. He's obviously a very good all-around back, but he's not someone who's going to eat into those 209 vacant targets. I don't see him getting the 70 targets Freeman had in his partial season last year. So by virtue of no one else being there, Ridley, who I hate, becomes my breakout.
Yeah, and I was just doing some quick math while you were somehow trashing your breakout player on this podcast. But Ridley played 13 games last year. So if we just take his 13 games, so this isn't even like a half season extrapolation. He played a vast majority of the season. He would have seen 114 targets, 77 catches for 1,065 yards and 8.6 touchdowns. That's what would have happened if he would have played 3 more games. He had 7 on the year. So it's not even like giving him an unrealistic touchdown bump. He was scoring a touchdown every other game, more so than he only played 13 games. So it's there. He had 92 targets his rookie year, was trending at 114 this year. He plays 16 games. He's going to be in the 120, 130 target range this season.
I think he gets to 150-ish.
It's entirely possible.
And I hate it.
Yeah, I know you don't like Calvin Ridley, but at least he's better than Rodney Ridley. So
not much room there. So you could go ahead and do your bust, and then I will do mine, which ties into my sleeper. So who's your Falcons bust?
There was a couple ways that I could have went here. Do we see the Julio cliff? Anything's possible, but
it's coming.
Probably unlikely. The dude just gets too many targets, and Matt Ryan is not going to stop throwing it his way. At the end of the day, Julio Jones is, and this listen, it's not Julio Jones, but I just wrote this fun fact down as I was looking at research. Julio Jones has seen no less than 9.2 targets per game since 2014. That was his low watermark season. It was getting 9+ targets per game.
Good for him.
And since 2014, this isn't even like in the last 2 seasons. Now the dude is just Matt Ryan knows where he's throwing the ball a lot of the time in the game, and kudos to him. Julio Jones is one of the best receivers in the game. So. Could have went Julio, but I abstained because I think Julio's one more uber productive season in him because of this shitty offense and the lack of available alternative options in said offense. Now, if they would have went and got CeeDee Lamb like they should have,
dun, 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 dun,
man, all bets would have been off. But I reluctantly went with Todd Gurley. I understand why the Rams let him go. It's because they gave him a terrible deal. They also ate a ton of money just to let him walk out the door. And then Todd Gurley quickly ran back home to Georgia and took a $5 million deal, which is probably easy for him to take since I think he's getting like $10 million from the Rams for this season as well. So he's not hurting. Yeah, he just wanted to sign somewhere else quick, and he's a bulldog, so maybe he just wanted to play for the Falcons for a season. Yep. And he knows how the story ends. But I just didn't see the same Todd Gurley last year. And granted, the Rams sucked. Their offensive line was dog shit. They were just running Gurley in the piles all day long. There wasn't any unique scheming for him as a pass catcher. I'm just scared. And I own Gurley in a few spots, and you have to ride it out at this point in time because you just can't get the value that I still believe he deserves, and maybe ends up somewhere else next year. But he has tremendous upside in this offense because there is no one behind him. If you want to throw some chips down on Brian Hill, Ito Smith, or Quadre Olison, be my guest. But they all proved they are not scaring Todd Gurley's touches in 2020. So he could be great, but he has a tremendous amount of bust potential. And if he doesn't get the touchdowns that he's gotten his last couple NFL seasons with those Rams, he's going to bust at the end of the day. So reluctantly, Todd Gurley.
I went with Hayden Hurst. So by comparison, last year, Austin Hooper for these Atlanta Falcons, 97 targets, 75 catches. Hayden Hurst over his 2-year career has only had 62 targets total and 43 total receptions. So,
well, in Hayden Hurst's defense, he was a first-round draft pick by the Baltimore Ravens before they went and got Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. So
they took Andrews in the same draft as him. Yeah,
I said before they took Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Yeah.
So Hurst has never shown it. I don't think he's bad. I think he's a good real-life NFL tight end. I think he's good at blocking. He's a good all-around player. I don't think he's ever going to be an uber productive fantasy tight end. I think he's miscast. I think they kind of panicked, had to get somebody in there that they felt a little better about. So they went ahead and brought him in. I just don't see him ever fulfilling as much of a tight end friendly podcast as this is. I don't see him being the guy who's going to do that for this team. So I am listing him as my bust because people are drafting him to kind of step in and put up the numbers that Hooper did last year, and I don't see it at all. By comparison, my sleeper, sticking at tight end, is Jaden Graham. I think over the course of a season, for fantasy purposes, I think Jaden Graham is a better receiving threat than Hayden Hurst is. Now, is he a better blocker? No, Hayden Hurst is a better all-around tight end. But I think as the season progresses, I think we see Jaden Graham actually start picking up a little more work towards the end of the season. He had a little splash last year, couple game stretch where he had 7 receptions and 100 and something yards with a touchdown. when he was forced into action, he was okay. Nothing amazing, but he was able to produce when he was given the opportunity. For fantasy purposes is the important part here. So for me, Jaden Graham, he's not essentially, he is. He's totally free. He's worth the dart throw at the end of your drafts. If anything happens to Hurst injury-wise, he's thrust into the 100% starter role for this team. For me, Jaden Graham is my Falcons sleeper.
Yeah, didn't see that coming. The Falcons sent a second-round pick, one of their second-round picks, pick 55, and exchange late-round picks to go get Hayden Hurst, who just 2 years ago was a first-round pick. I want to go back and see who the Ravens could have drafted with that first-round pick, knowing in hindsight that they got Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. But I'm Hayden Hurst. I'm Team Hayden Hurst sleeper, unfortunately. Matt Ryan throws it at tight end. Always does, and I get it. You think it could be Jaden Graham, who I hope you're right because I own him in a couple deep tight end premium leagues. I just don't believe that you will be right because they gave up way too much to bring him in. He's already training with Matt Ryan. The dude's like driving up from Jacksonville, Florida to train in Georgia with Matt Ryan like multiple times. Well, it's not the end-all be-all drive. Jacksonville is North Florida, but it shows a commitment. Huh?
Is Matt Ryan a ginger? They got that ginger connection going?
There's also that. I was going to talk about the flowing locks, the terrible aesthetic that Hayden Hurst is trying to pull off. As a fellow redhead, there are certain things that you can and cannot do in life. And the first that you absolutely cannot do is go long. You just can't. It's unacceptable by any means. And then he has like the big, Scottish beard to go with it. I mean, he's trying to channel like, old age Braveheart, and we're in modern society, Hayden. So reevaluate the aesthetic, and listen. By all accounts, I hear dude's a great guy, and he's a charitable guy, and it's I think he feels like
thinks he's Todd Marinovich out there.
But it's just he stands out in a crowd. I'll give him that. So yeah, I just went Hayden Hurst because there's going to be options, opportunity in that offense. We both said how bad we think the Falcons are going to be, how many times they're going to have to throw the ball. You just said that Calvin Ridley could get 150 targets this year as the wide receiver 2 on his own team. There's just going to be targets to go around. And Hayden Hurst, although he did not live up to his billing as a first-round pick, he showed some explosive ability in spurts. It just so happens that Mark Andrews is great. And so Hayden Hurst ended up being kind of like the 1B blocker, even kind of behind Nick Boyle. Like he just got lost in the shuffle for those Baltimore Ravens. But now as the alpha in a room where his only competition is the aforementioned Jaden Graham, I'm pretty sure was undrafted, and I don't think will pose much of a threat. I do believe that Hayden Hurst will return a tight end one season pretty easily in 2020.
Hurtful. What is your bold prediction or prediction?
Yep, I just
I went bold.
Okay, I like it. Can't wait to hear it. You went pretty bold on the Buccaneers as well, as you just kind of went scorched earth on them.
Boy, you're really gonna like this one.
But I just said that Matt Ryan finally throws for 5,000 yards in 2020. I was not aware he hadn't done it. I know it's a big number, but his career high is 49.44, which he did in 2016. I think he hits that 5,000-yard club in 2020 with the Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Todd Gurley, Hayden Hurst contingent in a bad offense in a bad team. I don't think there'll be a bad offense that will be playing catch-up quite frequently in this NFC South. I think they are by far the third best team in this division, and they are going to be involved in some shootouts at the end of the day.
I went Jaden Graham will outscore Hayden Hurst in fantasy this year. That's my bold prediction.
You pretty much already said that like 2 minutes ago. So you really, John, I mean, you call yourself a podcast professional, and usually there's a build-up to such things when you say it's going to be bold. But when you literally said it 5 minutes ago, it doesn't have that same zing, my man.
It kind of melted together. Okay. I didn't anticipate going on as big a Jaden Graham rant as I.
Sometimes you can't help yourself.
Spiraled out of control. Yes,
when the mood strikes you. So okay, we disagree on that tight end room, but let's move on to those Carolina Panthers.
Much like the Falcons before them, they drafted absolutely no one for offensive skill position. in free agency, they brought in Mr. Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson. Teddy B and Robbie Anderson. Robbie worked with their coaching staff in the past at Rutgers, and Teddy B is also familiar with this scheme, as Joe Brady was the OC in
New Orleans 2 years ago.
So they brought in guys that were familiar with their new system I'm going to be running. I can't hate it, and actually I found myself acquiring both of these guys quite a bit in the offseason just because the price was right. So hopefully they hit because I need it. What do you think of their small splash for fantasy this year?
Yeah, I was targeting the aforementioned Teddy 3 sticks in the Scott Fish Bowl, but I missed out, and I would have loved to have him as my QB3 behind Mahomes and Watson, but alas, didn't get there. And Robbie Anderson, I think he's been hamstrung under the tyranny of Adam Gase during his time in the NFL as a New York Jet. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with those Panthers. And like you said, he knows Matt Rule well from their time together at Temple, my alma mater. Go Owls.
What did I say, Rutgers?
I believe you did say Rutgers, but
close enough.
Incorrect, as they would say in the business. So he was a Temple Owl. So yeah, it was. They did some in free agency and they went heavy defense as necessary because this defense was bad last year and will still be terrible this year because I just can't think all these rookies that they need to play immediately are going to come in and just mesh right out of the gate. So this Panthers team I think they're going to be bad. I think they're one of the worst teams in the NFL when it's all said and done. They're a 2-3 win team. 4 is the ceiling in my opinion. So that doesn't necessarily hurt them from a fantasy perspective. So I've been kind of leading out, but let's have you give your breakout performer on these Panthers.
I got a feeling you're going to say this name at some point too. I went with Ian Thomas. Rookie year, he had 30 targets. Last year, he had 49. I think the trajectory this year, he's got no competition here. I think he's in line for at least 80 targets. He had 6 starts as a rookie in 2018. Oddly enough, he only had 3 starts last year. So he ended up being 87th in targets as a rookie, 110th last year. I just don't see how he doesn't go 55 for 490 and 4, which puts him low-end tight end 1 territory. I just don't see how he doesn't volume his way into production unless the Teddy B totally shits the bed and this whole team falls apart. He's got the time there now. He's kind of the veteran on this team, especially at the position. And we've always been Ian Thomas fans, so I think he really pops this year. And like I said, low-end tight end 1 is easily in the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, we'll talk about Mr. Thomas soon. But I went with DJ Moore. He was wide receiver 14 last year. He's currently being selected as wide receiver 14 in Fantasy Football Calculator. I don't know where. I probably should have looked this up before we just went live, but I will do it on the fly to see where he finished. I don't believe he finished as a wide receiver 1 last year, and he did not. He finished as wide receiver 15. So room to grow for Mr. Moore. Only played 15 games, so slightly off. He would have finished higher. But there's other guys that didn't play 16 games either, including Chris Godwin earlier, who still was able to be wide receiver 2 in 14 games. But I think the sky's the limit for DJ Moore. I think he's one of the best receivers in the NFL. Very interested to see what he can do in this offense. As I said, I think they're going to stink. I think their defense is going to let up a ton of points, and their offense will have to play catch up from the opening bell. Weeks 1 through hopefully 17 of the NFL season. So he's the alpha in that room, no doubt. Robbie Anderson is a good second banana. Curtis Samuel is there. They have talent. You mentioned Ian Thomas, not to mention the best receiving back potentially of all time in Christian McCaffrey. No offense to Marshall Faulk and the like, but Christian McCaffrey is a pretty special human being when it's all said and done. So Moore is going to get opportunity early and often. He gets the targets. He's going to get the catches. The dude catches everything, and he gets a little luckier in the touchdown department. He's going to threaten as a top 5 wide receiver this season. And I said he's easily going to be a top 8. I think it's where he lands. But he will be a wide receiver 1 in 2020. He's my wide receiver 2 in the Scott Fish Bowl. So let's go.
He was, I wanted him, but I wasn't willing to take him at his ADP. For busts, I'm going to you mentioned his name in passing. Curtis Samuel is fucking garbage. He is their current wide receiver 3. You mentioned Christian McCaffrey. I mentioned Ian Thomas. Curtis Samuel is at best this team's 5th option in the passing game. And to me, he has been trash since he's come into the league. I didn't like him coming out. I've liked nothing I've seen from him in the NFL. To me, I don't know why people are still taking him. He is garbage and doesn't even have a role on this team. So for me, Curtis Samuel, Busteroo, no thank you.
All right, well, we had a similar thought process, but unfortunately, different individuals. And it pains me to say this, but my bust is Ian Thomas. And I wrote that I love Ian Thomas, but he is shaping up to be at best a 4th passing game option in this offense. He is definitely behind DJ Moore. He is definitely behind Christian McCaffrey, and he will likely fall behind one of either Robbie Anderson or Curtis Samuel. So
Robbie.
And that would be my assumption as well. I didn't pay him $10 million not to throw him the football. So while Greg Olsen finally got out of the you-know-what way, everything has changed. I mean, it's not just a new offseason, no Greg Olsen. There's an entire new regime here. They brought in other offensive weaponry. There's a new quarterback who doesn't even know Ian Thomas from Adam. This was Cam Newton, is why we liked Ian Thomas initially. And although he's crazy athletic, I don't want to rely on it this season. So he's still a hold in dynasty for me, but I'm not hitching my wagon to Ian Thomas 2020. He won't be one of my guys as far as late round tight end, because I just think there's going to be too much volatility. So
for sleepers, I just threw a name out there. Most of the people on this team are known. There's not going to be many sleepers. I went with Mr. Reggie Bonifon. Like you said, there's a new coaching staff in place. Do they give McCaffrey this ungodly workload another year? It's certainly possible, but it is possible, too, that they try to rest him up a little bit and keep him healthy. Like you said, this team is likely to be trash. They're trying to build something for the future. They're going to need a healthy Christian McCaffrey to be competitive 2, 3, 4 years down the line. There's no need to give him a monster workload while this team sinks to the bottom of the standings this year. I think we could see an uptick for Mr. Bonifon this year. And if not, he's still one of the best handcuffs ever, because McCaffrey does get hurt. Not that he'd see the volume McCaffrey did. There's no one else on the depth chart. He is now the starting running back of this team. So there's a chance, I'm not a huge, yards per attempt guy, yards per carry. Most people aren't. It's a garbage stat. But he did average 7.3 yards an attempt in his limited work, average 9.5 per reception. So on a per-touch basis, he's been effective. Do I think he's going to be anything for fantasy? Not really, but especially if you're a McCaffrey owner, he's somebody to grab late and could pay dividends throughout the year, especially if he sees any uptick in work.
That was my rationale for Christian McCaffrey last year, too, is that they just can't continue to just burden this dude with the entire offense.
Yeah, we'll just do it every year.
And we were wrong, but you're right. There was a different regime there last year, and Norv Turner has been known to ride a single back, so shouldn't have been that surprised in hindsight. But I'm still burning a candle for Jordan Scarlett at the end of the day. So we'll see how that turns out, because I don't know. I'm just not the biggest Bonifon believer, but hopefully he gets a shot and can do something. My sleeper, and you shit on him earlier, and so I'm going to just have to dig him up, brush him off, and tell him to get back out there. And it's Curtis Samuel. I believe they'll find some creative ways to use Samuel, including out of backfield. He had 19 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown in 2019. And hopefully Brady brings continued innovation to this team, because we've seen, I think it was Ian Harditz who's been all over the Curtis Samuel, what could have been Twitter stream of just countless missed shots by Kyle Allen for Curtis Samuel and just unrealized air yards and all that. So that aside, I just think he's a good football player. And if they can use him effectively and put a competent quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater, who will be getting the ball out quickly, make no mistake about it, Teddy Bridgewater's not sitting in there waiting for those deep shots to develop. But DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel can eat all day on slants, and comeback routes. So I believe Curtis Samuel, who's currently going as wide receiver 61 in PPR per Fantasy Football Calculator, will be a wide receiver 3 in 2020. That's not even my prediction. I believe he is sleeping, and he's going to return value for people. No doubt. Again, shitty team, throwing a lot.
Well, let's get into your predictions then. What's your prediction for the Panthers?
All right, I made 2, and I'm going to save the best for last. My first, as I've kind of said repeated times, is that the Carolina Panthers will give up more than 500 points in 2020. And just as a point of reference, the worst team in 2019 from a points allowed perspective was those Miami Dolphins, who gave up 494.
Woo!
So they are going to be bad, like Michael Jackson bad in 2020. And that's going to lead to some fireworks offensively. And my second, Giving
children wine and Coke cans bad?
I don't believe that the first one was bold. I just think it's a fact, a statement, predicting the future, is that Christian McCaffrey finishes outside of the top 3 running backs.
I love it.
In 2020, I said he is now an honorary member of the 400 Touch Club. And did you know that Le'Veon Bell is the only other active running back with a 400 touch season? He did so in 2017. Remember what he did in 2018?
Didn't play, right?
He did not play football.
Yeah.
He took the year off after his 400 touch season. And while everyone wants to believe that Mr. McCaffrey is just a bulletproof individual, I am still of the mindset that it catches up to everyone eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
If they continue to burden him, he's going to break. And unfortunately, with the likes of Reggie Bonifon and Jordan Scarlett behind him, no one is knocking at that door for touches out of that backfield. So if I'm an OC, Chris McCaffrey isn't leaving the field again in 2020 because my job's on the line every single season.
Yeah,
he's going to get it again, and I don't predict injury. That's your thing. I just don't. Running back ones don't repeat. It doesn't happen. It's so uncommon that whether it's a Saquon Barkley, who I believe will be the running back 1 this year in PPR, or a Zeke, or an Alvin Kamara, or a super sleeper like my boy Miles Sanders, who I do believe has it in his range of outcomes. It's just not going to be Christian McCaffrey in 2020.
My prediction in standard scoring leagues, non-PPR, I would not believe this in PPR. Standard scoring leagues, I think Robbie Anderson outscores DJ Moore this year.
Yikes.
Right? Bold craziness. I think he gets a lot. I think he sees the end zone a lot. That's where I'm banking on that. I think Robbie becomes kind of their.
It's just not Teddy's bag, man. You know what I mean? Like, I know that Robbie Anderson isn't a one-trick pony. I believe that. I think he's kind of was pigeonholed with those Jets. I just think DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel are much better after the catch guys than Robbie Anderson. So he'll still have to be that field stretcher in their offense. And Teddy isn't really isn't one to challenge teams deep. So we shall see. I want to vehemently disagree, as I've not only expressed my love for DJ Moore, but I hitched my Scott Fishbowl wagon to him rather aggressively.
No, and I like Moore in
PPR.
Yeah, I like him in standard too. I don't think I'm not an anti DJ Moore guy. I just think he gets a lot more work, gets a lot more receptions in PPR leagues and goes past Robbie. But I think when you take the receptions out of it, I think yardage will be similar, and I think Robbie will get more touchdowns. But Teddy drops back, the pendulum drops back with him, swings forward and propels the ball outward.
All right. We shall see. Let's get off of Teddy before something bad happens.
Hammer swinging. Saints also not much in the NFL draft, as we alluded to when we started. Traded up, took Adam Troutman in the 3rd round. Tight end was one of my favorites coming into the draft. Don't love the spot for this year. And then in the 7th, they traded up to take Tommy Stevens, quarterback, because I believe it was the Panthers. Someone in division was looking at him, and they wanted to jump ahead just to take their guy. So Stevens is totally worthless except as a fuck you to other teams in the conference. But really, Troutman. Then in terms of free agency, they obviously brought in Jameis Winston to be the backup or third string, whatever the hell Taysom Hill is in that system. So Winston is there as a backup, number 3, whatever his job will be. And they brought in Emmanuel Sanders to give them a nice number 2 option in the passing game they haven't really had in a while. What do you think of their offseason?
I did not know the Tommy Stevens fact. That's cool. I love when teams just burn a draft pick just to stick it to a division rival. So kudos to Sean Payton. That does not surprise me. Sean Payton
They traded a pick next year just to come in and
awesome. Him and Mickey Loomis just drunk on Bourbon Street, laughing their asses off at the end of the day. So not much done in the offseason. They're just running it back, right? Brought Drew Brees back, getting the band back together, invested in the future at tight end, but no one outside of your boy Manny Sanders of consequence, added to this offense this year. So let's just dive right in. And for my breakout, I wrote none. None.
This is
their entire offense
as we
fully realized.
Not to trample all over you. You yelling none here is going to be so fantastic as we wrap this up. I just want you to know in a preview of what's coming. I'm very happy you said that.
Now that is foreshadowing. Yes, I wrote their entire offense has been fully realized unless Adam Troutman shocks the world with his rookie year production. If you want to predict an Alvin Kamara injury and we finally get a full slate of Latavius Murray in this offense, maybe. I'm not. Manny Sanders has already had some all-pro seasons and some memorable wide receiver. Probably 2. I don't know. He's ever been a 1. Maybe he's been low end 1. But Michael Thomas has been the wide receiver 1. So there's just no one there. There's no one. No one can break out in this offense. So unless you have something that is totally unrealistic from a breakout perspective, we could just move on.
What's funny with this team, as I went through a few guys I wanted to talk about and crunch numbers for a breakout, and you said Adam Troutman throwing his name out there. I said maybe Troutman can – they traded for him. They're probably going to want to get him used up. Cook wasn't volume heavy, so I wrote down 30 catches, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns for Troutman, which according to last year would have had him finish tight end 28. His ADP right now, tight end 29. So not even a breakout, kind of right where he's going. But like you said, there's not a lot of people here who can even take that next step and break out. So it was Troutman and the slightest of breakouts because he's finishing in my projections right around where he should be.
Literally the only Saint player who can break out. It's fact.
Yeah.
Absolute fact. So good. My statement of it being impossible and your 1 slot potential breakout opportunity at Troutman lands. Obviously, we all know I'm still Team Jared Cook, and he's going to return another tight end 1 season. But if anyone can, it is Dayton's Adam Troutman. So
right. Who's your bust?
Let's go. My bust is Manny Sanders. It's unfortunate. I love Manny Sanders. I love watching him play. I wanted him to come to the Eagles when he left and went to San Fran. I thought he was been a perfect addition to the Eagles offense. And I think he'll be a great wide receiver too for the Saints, but he's just not going to get the volume at the end of the day. Michael Thomas is just a vacuum. The running back position absorbs a ton. You know that Brees loves the tight end position, and they just cycle other players in that wide receiver room. So while I love Manny Sanders, I said not at his current price. And, wide receiver 42 at 9.11 isn't reaching, for a piece of this Saints offense. But Mecole Hardman, Jamison Crowder, Jalen Reagor, Anthony Miller, and Sterling Shepard are all going after him. I, without hesitation, take every single one of those wide receivers over Manny Sanders in redraft. So given his draft spot and those drafted after him, he is going to bust.
Well, I do love me some Manny Sanders.
Yes, you do.
So that hurt my feelings. When I crunched the numbers and went through these guys, my bust is also Manny Sanders.
Yes.
I had been really in my mind. I was like, man, this guy's got to be a wide receiver 2 in this system. He's the best weapon they've had opposite Michael Thomas for a couple years now. Maybe wide receiver 3. And then I kind of went through what the Saints number 2 has done over the years, what Sanders has done. I had him for 60 catches, 650 yards, 5 touchdowns, which is wide receiver 42, which is higher than his ADP in dynasty leagues. You said what, redraft? He's number 42, coincidentally?
41. Yeah, 42, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, how funny is that? So dynasty 66. So he's outperforming his dynasty ADP, but where I had expectations for him in my head when I actually did the math and saw where he's likely to end up, it's just not going to be there, which breaks my heart. So he is also my bust, and it makes me quite sad.
Yeah, Brees just spreads the ball around. I mean, Michael Thomas is a mold breaker as far as Brees wide receiver since he's came to the Saints. And granted, he's by far the best wide receiver the Saints have had since Drew Brees has been there, but he just doesn't. He throws it. He throws it where the defense allows him. He's not force feeding it to anyone. And there's a pecking order that's already established with those Saints. So unfortunately, he's going to make the Saints a lot better. It's great number 2 to have opposite Michael Thomas. If anything, that just helps Drew Brees, not Manny Sanders. But that takes us to sleeper. And if no one can break out, I think it's entirely unlikely that there's any sleepers on this team either, because someone has to get moved out of their spot for someone else to be able to do any damage. But I did go with Traquan Smith. It's year 3 for Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith has 10 touchdowns on 69 career targets. That is a 14.5% touchdown rate. That is just absurd. It's 5 touchdowns each season of his NFL career, and he just gets those big splash touchdowns. If he can get any consistent role in this offense in year 3, he's got breakout written all over him. I don't believe that he will because of the aforementioned Manny Sanders, and the reliance on other pass catchers above a Traquan Smith. But if anyone in this offense can jump out of nowhere and throw up 8 to 10 touchdowns on limited pass volume, it's going to be Traquan Smith.
In very small letters in parentheses with a question mark, I also wrote Traquan Smith. But my real answer for who the sleeper is here, to bring it full circle, much like you started with breakouts, I wrote none. There's nothing. Everybody on this team, like you're for breakout, almost verbatim for sleepers. You know what everybody on this team is. Smith, like you said, could he be the guy? Yes. Could he be the sleeper guy? Yeah, but the little bit we've seen, he hasn't been as amazing as everybody was hoping for on this team. So for me, it's none. There's no one here that's sleepy. This is a heavily targeted team for fantasy. People want a piece of this offense. And there's nobody here that you're not going to be aware of existing. So you started with none. I'm ending with none. And with that, we're going to jump to predictions.
The None Orleans Saints. They are. All right, my prediction, and it pains me to say it because he's one of my favorite players to watch just because of how good he is.
Since we're going opposite directions here.
It's Drew Brees, who's currently being drafted as QB7. Per Fantasy Football Calculator, will finish outside of the top 10 quarterbacks this season. And I wrote, gone are the days of 650-plus attempts, 5,000 yards, and 40-plus touchdowns. A career 5.6 TD rate is more likely to show back up than the 6.5 and 7.1 he had the last 2 seasons. Those are outliers. Those aren't, consistent with his career totals. More rushing touchdowns with a healthy Alvin Kamara, less passing touchdowns by Drew Brees. They just gave Taysom Hill a ton of money. His role is not going to shrink in this offense. If anything, he's going to throw it more, get more direct snaps, do more random shit to mislead the entire fantasy fan base. But I think Drew Brees is going to regress somewhat to a game manager at this point in time and not shooting for records every single week, trying to destroy people by 40 points. Still a great quarterback, thinking more of the Aaron Rodgers role. Safe, conservative, wins games, doesn't lose them. I don't know that it's entirely possible he doesn't finish as a QB1 this year.
Well, my Scott Fishbowl team squaring the balls with that one. I went with
he's still going to have a 75% completion percentage. So as far as that's concerned, he's still going to be awesome. At the end of the day, we'll throw interceptions. So don't worry your pretty little head about that. But you think 5,040 is in a range of outcomes for him, you will be disappointed.
I went with another member of this offense, Alvin Kamara. I think his floor is 336 points, which last year would have been running back 2. We mentioned earlier with McCaffrey. I don't know if he sees the kind of volume he did last year. Barkley, the Giants offense scares me. I think he's got a legit shot at being the running back 1 this year. Similar to what you said, if Brees plays it a little safe, he's going to be dumping it off a little bit more to the backfield. And Kamara was a little banged up the last couple years. For me, Kamara, I think, like I said, 336 is his floor. I think it wouldn't be crazy to see him up in that 380 range if he really gets volume heavy. So I love Kamara this year. I wish I had done this before my Scott Fishbowl draft because he may have been an earlier pick of mine. But yeah, I just think there's no one to compete with him with the way this team is structured and with similar to what you said, what I think Brees and this offense wants to do. So Alvin Kamara, I think, is going to be in line for a monster year.
Okay. Before I go into this, was Alvin Kamara there when you took Dalvin Cook in the first round of the Scott Fishbowl?
I don't know.
I sure hope not, because you're better than that. I don't think you would have even hesitated to take Alvin Kamara. I love Alvin Kamara, and I know he got hurt last year, so I'm not going to hold last year against him. But his most productive year thus far was his rookie year on his limited touches. And as he's gotten increasingly involved with his offense, his just per touch averages have just gone down across the board. And granted, he had 18 touchdowns in his 2018 campaign, but he had 275 touches in that same. I just don't know that that's optimal for him. And Latavius Murray proved he can shoulder a load when Kamara went out. So I love Kamara. I love watching him play. I think one of the most explosive players in the NFL. He's what, guaranteed. What was his receptions? He had 81 receptions all 3 seasons of his NFL career. One of the most random stats of all time. Obviously would have exceeded if he was healthy all last year, but gets the touches. But he just went from 10.2 to 8.8 to 6.6 yards per reception his 3 years. And there's randomization in yards per reception, and granted, he was injured, but he's just not been the explosive rookie year guy these last 2 years, in my opinion. And I just don't believe he's meant to be a bell cow. I don't think he should be in the 300 touch conversation. And he was trending there last season. They're just giving him more and more. I think he should be more in the rookie year when he had 201 touches. I think maximize him, keep him healthy is my concern, because they saw what happens when he got hurt last year. And he had 7 injuries last year. It wasn't just one. He had his whole body.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think he's a very not volume dependent. I think he can do more with less. The limited touches, I think for him, given his size and, like you said, what we saw last year with injuries, I think it's been proven statistically anyway over his short career, but I think he is more productive on fewer touches. Keep him fresh, keep the beating off of him, drag the corpse of Latavius Murray into the dirt and let him explode when he does get his chances, because he's on the sideline catching some breathers and not taking a beating. So I could not agree more.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, he would have exceeded 200 carries in 2018. He only played 15 games, and he would have been just shy on a per-game basis. If he played 16 games, he would have had 195. And extrapolated out, he played 14. So, no, 200 touches, not 200 carries, is how you maximize Alvin Kamara. 120 carries, 80 catches.
FYI, Kamara went before my first pick even in Scott Fish.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that up for everyone, because we would have lost listeners if you would have taken Dalvin Cook over Alvin Kamara in the Scott Fishbowl.
Brees went ahead of me.
And that's right. Hold on. Oh, you went ahead of Brees. Gotcha. I forgot you took Dalvin Cook in a second. You reached for a QB2, Drew Brees, in the first round of Scott Fishbowl.
Hurtful.
But all right, that was our NFC South. Why don't you button us up, John, so we can get back about our business. I do have work to do.
So, yes, and hopefully you enjoyed the NFC South. Going to jump into the East and then the West, and then we'll get into some other non-divisional breakdown stuff. Should be fun. Got some games and guests and other nonsense lined up. So, for myself, John DeBari, for my co-host, Matt Walker, the missing in action, as always, Andrew Burke, we are the Fantasy 40, and we are out of here.
Ow! So both
Teddy,
your boys, I think, at the end of the day. You love Teddy Bridgewater. That's undeniable.
No, I don't like either one of them. I've ended up
things about Teddy Bridgewater.
Oh, the gift. Teddy's bringing the gift. Yeah, that's true. They're if you're not sure what I'm talking about, Teddy Bridgewater is the rare three-legged human being. But
it's not hurting in the pants.
No, sir. I fucking, for some reason, I put nutmeg on my fucking stupid coffee today, and now my like I'm eating fire.
Back your throat, huh?
Yeah, terrible idea.
You know what a nutmeg is?
Fuck. You have to edit this out. What did I write? Is it targets or receptions for James White? Oh, it is receptions. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. I'll just start over. Fuck it.